Well, good morning and Happy New Year, York City Church. You are watching the first live stream of 2021, which is a live stream with a bit of a difference in that I'm joined by my three fellow elders. I've got Pete and Mark. And the idea this morning is that we're going to talk together and reflect on 2020. We're going to think a little bit about the year that is ahead of us. And in order to do that, we've got some questions here that are slightly pre-prepared, but to keep an element of surprise, we're going to share around them and just discuss as we go. We could have just sat here and chatted, but it would have been maybe a slightly unedifying spectacle just to have the four of us waffling on. So that's the plan for today. Normally on a Sunday morning at this time of year, we would be doing something called a blueprint, which is really looking ahead to the year and talking about some of the key things that are going to be happening in the life of the church. Obviously, as well you know, things are a little bit up in the air and we're not entirely sure how things are going to pan out for 2021. So what you could maybe receive this as is spiritual encouragement, and as we share our lives around this table together in the presence of you all digitally, we hope that it will encourage you and strengthen you as well. And I'm sure things will spill out in terms of hopes and dreams for 2021. So, if you're ready, are we ready?
Yeah. I think so, yeah.
All right, well, let's give it a crack. So I've got this little deck of cards with questions, and I'm going to pass it round to Pete Roderick, and he doesn't know what he's going to get, and neither do I. So there you go, mate.
Thank you.
You take from the top, or?
From the top.
From the top.
That's the bottom.
I'm good at this. What has it been like to be an elder in a pandemic?
Oh.
So, it's been hard. It's definitely been different. It's had a sense, I think, of some of the rhythms of leading a church week in, week out, which, you know, when they're not there, for a while, that feels a bit of a blessing in a sense, that there's not so much to prepare for, that there's not so many meetings, and the sense of which that there's good actually about break and rest from that. But I think pretty soon, for me at least, that has been replaced with a real desire to want to be together with the church community, and a real missing and mourning of that, a real mourning of not seeing people face to face, not having a meal around a table with others in Christian community, and actually the things of church life which sometimes are not always so sort of easy. I guess even that, a sense in which the rough and the smooth of church life has felt further away. And I've mourned that. I've really missed that. I can't wait for it to be here with us again. So I think being an elder in a pandemic has had probably a combination of a little bit of rest from the weekly rhythm, but a mourning and a missing of the things that I really hold dear about loving and serving a church community. How about you, Mark? What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that sense of connection is challenging, and I think that there's therefore almost a greater sense of trust in God ultimately shepherding his church, that at times, even I guess with our preaching, almost you don't get to see the whites of people's eyes. You don't get to see what's going on in people's lives as much. So there's a sense of trusting that actually, as we've seen in our lives and in the church, that God is the one who carries and goes. But that's hard at times, where you're actually wanting to be present with people, and equally to be able to kind of proclaim, share, do all of the things that we'd usually do. There's a sense of limits and difficulty with some of those things. So yeah, I echo what you're saying, Pete, in terms of being together with people, but also that sense of almost longing to be able to do those things that we had done. But yeah, trusting God and learning those new rhythms together. Yeah. Perhaps yours has been a bit different, hasn't it? I guess.
Yeah, I think for me it's been an up and down year in all aspects. Therefore, in terms of eldership particularly, I think the first part of the year was good in terms of more time to do some of the things that perhaps as elders we don't get to do as much. Being able to focus on prayer, focus on the word. I felt I just had a lot more time in the early parts of the year, with work pressures being different. But then moving through the year, obviously things got a little bit harder, a few hospital stays and things, which just led to a little bit more of a squeeze on everything, less time to connect with people, I think has been the big thing that I've missed the most, both in terms of friendship, but also in terms of leadership and oversight, just that ability to enjoy faith with one another and to inspire one another has been much harder, I think, this year. But it also just all the way through the year, I've just had this deep longing to get back to seeing each other, worshipping together, that kind of corporate sense of we're in this together. Alan?
Oh, it's me. Yeah, I think it's there's all kinds of things that come into play with this, isn't there? I mean, there's, like the guys have said, there's that element of missing the corporate, missing being around people, as well as the slight relief of having a little bit more time capacity. I think it probably is quite a big thing for leaders to have to reckon with the fact that they can't do what they normally do, and that's a humbling thing too. That sort of settling into, okay, well, my particular role here is not the pinnacle, but there's a God who is at work, and I'm not in control of how God is at work, and and that's got to be the way that it is for now. I think it's probably been, in some ways, an element of trying to learn how to be an elder in a pandemic, probably. And I suppose I was just reflecting, an elder is not it's not a job that you have, like some career choice. It's something that God makes you. And so really you're trying to work out and wrestle through in a completely changed circumstance what this all means and what this all looks like. And you can't do everything the same. And so you have to try and trust God with that. And even down to decision making. I think I've been very conscious over the last 9 months or so that there's probably all kinds of disappointments out there amongst the church community, and about decisions that have or haven't been made. But as an elder, you just have to make decisions, don't you? You have to go with some things and not go with others, and of course it's all up in the air and all different, and that's just all been part and parcel, I think, of being an elder during a really wildly different year than any of us expected. So, yeah. Interesting.
Shall we move into the next question?
Pass on to Mark, yeah.
Otherwise you'll never get through them, will we?
In a socially distanced manner.
Yeah. Right, let's have a look. So, biggest obstacle to growth. Oh, that's an interesting one to say. I mean, the classic answer to this, isn't it, is myself and things. And so, I guess...
I agree.
Yeah. Just generally, always. I guess for me personally, I think that, the challenge of almost being forced into these quite kind of insular-looking kind of household contexts and things feels like almost that could lead me into being much more kind of self-orientated. And so I think for me personally, kind of that kind of self-denial, others focus, outward looking would be something that I would talk about there. And I think probably more broadly in terms of the church, I mean, there's all sorts of kind of natural obstacles, isn't there? But I think that sense of sort of presence together is something that feels quite restricting, but there's a big, I guess, caveat to that in that it feels as though God is also doing a work much bigger than that as well, that it's beyond almost, we think maybe about our evangelism efforts, and I can't personally develop the sense of deep friendships with others, and I find that really difficult at this time, because that would naturally be how I'd see things working out. But actually it feels as though over the last year God has been doing an unsettling amongst many people and an opening up and a softening of hearts that actually we might in the natural not be able to do. So I think there are kind of a range of different things that feel like sort of barriers or obstacles, but yet kind of knowing that there is a bigger picture going on in the kind of purposes of God. And one of the verses that's kind of stuck with me is the bit from Proverbs where it talks about many other plans of a man's of a person, but it's the Lord's purposes that prevail. And there is, I guess, in any sense of planning and dreaming, that sense of kind of trusting God. I don't know, Al, what's your reflections been on obstacles to growth?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the things for personally is just the intensity of life with lockdown and the change of it, the change of like pace and everything. Although on one level it opens things out a bit more, on another level there is an intensity, and like you were saying, that focus, it can all become quite insular, and that can become quite inhibiting, because then anything that you add into that, and anything that sort of maybe is a discipline, spiritually speaking, can feel quite, another discipline. When a lot else feels quite like a chore, a spiritual discipline doesn't sound like a lot of fun, does it? So I think that's probably been an obstacle, but then other obstacles have probably emerged from that in terms of myself and my own responses and reactions to things. I think when the chips are down, you find out again how selfish you are, how much more inclined you are to prefer your own comfort, and to sort of medicate your discomfort at the way that things are in all kinds of ways, and so I think that there's a reason that the classic answer is I'm the biggest obstacle to my growth, because it's true, and you are my biggest obstacle to mine. There's all kinds of things, isn't there? I mean, obviously as a church, it's all but impossible to quantify exactly what the obstacles are. When you can't meet, then how do you gauge what's going on? It's tricky, but Either of you guys?
I'd echo myself as well. I guess if that's what we're all doing.
Unity in the team is wonderful.
I think for me, the need to step outside comfort zones has been very much reduced in terms of meeting people, talking to people. It's very easy to focus on family and people that I get on well with. I think that's been an obstacle for personal growth. I haven't had to challenge myself because there's not been the need to. I think in terms of church, I think that quantification of what growth looks like is probably a lesson that I've needed to learn in this time, that we don't get to quantify what growing a church looks like, that God's at work behind the scenes more than he is in the way that I minister, the way that I interact with people. I think we need to take heart and faith in that going forward, that God's been at work growing, shaping, changing people, changing ourselves, that isn't going to cease in this coming year either. So faith, belief, as we go forward, I think is perhaps where I've been challenged the most in terms of he's doing stuff we're not as much.
I mean, I would reflect on that. For me, the specific, if not an obstacle to growth, something I have noticed is sometimes an inability during lockdown, or I haven't been quick to notice and acknowledge and bring God into my thinking. I guess my big obstacle in that sense has been pragmatism, in the problems and difficulties have been met with an immediate sense, well, I can resolve this out of my own good ideas, my reason, my sort of pragmatic approach, and sometimes just sitting back a little bit with the pain, with the problems, with the difficulty, letting it be painful, and turning to God for a solution, but also noticing when God is at work and you're just too blind, blinkered, or your expectations are oriented in a certain way, when God is doing something entirely other and has the right to do something entirely other because he is entirely other. Actually, that's a part of, I guess, it's not about being an elder so much, it's just being someone who lives by faith and not by sight. You don't just rely on the things that you see, you rely on something from elsewhere, which is harder to get your head around. You can't get hold of it, you can't grip it, and so we sort of revert to things we can get hold of and grip. But actually, that for me is a big obstacle. That pragmatic, get hold of it, grip it. When actually I can't. I just have to sit back a little bit and let God do it.
It's quite lonely.
Yeah, it's good as a bit.
Next up, how is your family? Wow, good question.
Watching this.
Hopefully one of them's asleep. Yeah, so they're good. So for those of you who I guess don't know, we had another little boy called Max in September, who was born a bit poorly, so I had to stay in hospital for a little while, then came home. Some things ongoing, he's still quite poorly going forward, but he's doing good. We're doing good. Sarah also had a rough ride of it post-childbirth, but she's also on the way up, so she's doing good. Elliot's been fantastic all year. Like, he's been genuinely proud of him, the way he's dealt with everything. And I'm doing all right as well after hospital as well, feeling almost back to full health, which has been good. It's been a bit of a battering of a year for us as a family. Most of us in and out of hospital in some way or another, and a lot of that's still ongoing into this year as well. But just feel loved and held by God through it, even in the roughest of times. It's never been a question of God's disappeared or he's not been there. Like, we've been angry with God, we've been cross with him for what's going on, but he's always been loving and faithful to us. Like, we're doing surprisingly well, I'd say. Better than I thought I'd be doing through it all. So yeah, we're doing okay. So Sarah is getting there, Elliot's doing great, Max is on the road to what will hopefully be some sort of normality this year. I could do with some more sleep, if I'm being honest, but having a newborn, that is always the case. How about you, Mark?
Yeah, I mean, equally sort of welcomed Lucas this year, and yeah, been really precious to have some of that time together as a family. Emily's on maternity leave and has been absolutely brilliant through quite testing times. I think if you'd have told us at the start of the year that we'd be sort of doing bits of homeschooling type stuff and with no external support and only being able to leave the house kind of once a day, you thought, oh, how on earth are we going to do it? But the sense of God's grace, I think, to us in different seasons. And so she's planning on going back to work in March. So just sort of anticipating that change for us as a family together, and Nia's started school and loving that as well. So that's been really brilliant.
Great.
So, great.
I mean, similarly, I mean, Beth was reflecting that if you'd given her 6-month notice that we would have to homeschool a 5-year-old and a 7-year-old while looking after a 2-year-old, it would have been a freak out. But actually, in a way, the lack of notice meant it went okay. It was tough those 6 months really for us. Just in terms of the chaos, the craziness, the slight sense of climbing up the walls, but also God really sustained us in it. Actually, our 2 girls were brilliant during it, got on with their work really well. There was a lot of laughter. There were a few tears at times, but
that's just you, mate.
That was nearly all me. So for us, I think the year has been fairly stable and good. I think my work has been very intense, so long hours and long weeks, and a lot of on call when that weird sort of halfway house of being around, but the phone goes regularly and having to suddenly extract myself. Sometimes it's quite convenient when food is up the wall and the kids are running amok, but it's
Godly man.
that can be hard. That's probably been the hardest thing this year, but God's grace has been with us as a family so much. We're so grateful for him sustaining us and keeping us.
That's brilliant.
How about you?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, like everybody else, the first lockdown was fairly epic, and Susie did most of the homeschooling with Zach, and it was really challenging, and for both of them actually. But then for quite a lot of the last year, our sort of day-to-day staff has remained largely the same. There's not been kind of huge changes. So Susie working at the hospital, that's continued. Zach was at school for some, and he and I have been fishing lots in like gaps and things, and when he was off school in the summer and everything, which has been good, and he loves it. And yeah, it's great. I mean, I think in terms of how God's been at work in us as a family, I think you heard Sue share the other week on the city stories, and I think that's ongoing, and just seeking God and trusting God for contentment, but also asking, is there more? Is there something new this year? Zach's making some really lovely steps forward spiritually, just in faith and trusting God and things, which is great. We sort of laugh and have fun fishing and fall out and bicker with each other as well. So it's almost like we're father and son and siblings at the same time sometimes. Zach, don't get any funny ideas if you're paying attention at this point. So yeah, I think the family is okay. Yeah, we've had a nice Christmas. I was quite relieved to not have to travel around the country at Christmas time. So it's been quite nice being at home. And kind of trying to gear up, getting back into work again, but it's tomorrow I start with renewed vigour, back to work. So yeah, we've been okay. I think generally family's been alright.
Yeah, and I guess it's worth reflecting as well that it's easier for us to default back to thinking of nuclear family at this point, but also just personally found so much love from the household of God, from the church, like unbelievably so, perhaps more than at any other point in my journey with City Church, at least. People loving us, caring for us. I didn't cook a meal for about 6 weeks, which was unbelievable. I almost felt like going back to hospital just to get another meal rota out of it. But it's been difficult in relationships, as I'm sure we've all found with friends and things, not seeing them. But at the same time, like the evidence of true depth of relationship that's been built for many years is just like it's beauty to enjoy, and seeing what God's at work in a community as well.
I agree. And thinking about those in a community who don't have, like you said, a nuclear family around them, people who are single, live alone. I think I've heard stories of them feeling loved and supported, but also acknowledging the fact that at least for us, I mean, I talk about climbing up the walls with a really busy house, but there's a sense of companionship that I've been able to have that others haven't, and just acknowledge that must have been really, really hard, and probably still is really, really hard. And yes, it's one thing that I think our prayer life needs to keep on sustaining, and as a church community, we need to keep on looking out for one another and praying that God would be that companion, and that we would be able to befriend as well as we can do remotely.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I wrote the questions, so none of these should be a surprise. What's your favourite sandwich filling, Pete? If Jesus asked you, what do you want me to do for you, how would you answer? That's the question of blind Bartimaeus at the end of Mark chapter 10. Other Gospels are available. Wow. I think if Jesus asked me that directly and eyeballed me today and said, well, what do you want me to do for you? I think I would probably ask him just to make me more loving. Honestly, in every way. And that would be probably just being slightly more open to other people. I do like my own spaces, as you know. More generous with my time, with my attitude. More patient. I just softer, probably. I'm aware sometimes I'm quite spiky. And I'd like to be a softer kind of guy. So that would probably be how I'd answer, honestly. Rather than please give me a rest, or or please let me catch a really big fish next time. It would probably be something personal like that, about my heart, I think. What about you? I'll go to Mark.
Yeah, I think kind of when that kind of question sort of come up, the thing that kind of sprung to mind really for me is, I guess, like praying and really desiring for salvation for kind of friends and those that I kind of work with and things is something that is totally out of my hands. But we know that Jesus has the kind of power to break through, and just so long to see that sense of you, Jesus, being glorified in those ways. And yeah, just that kind of desire of my heart to see that and to be a part of it as well. Like, I guess that would be, if I could ask that favour, that almost to the sense of sharing in that proclamation and being kind of witness to what Jesus is doing in people's lives is just outstanding. Yeah. And we just kind of long for that more in this year.
Sure.
Perhaps.
Yeah, I think the quick thing to think would just be a good night's sleep. But I think part of me would like to see Max not have to go through what he goes through, but at the same time, in the midst of all that we've gone through in the past few months, I'd ask God to help us to not miss what he's been doing, both now and what he's investing in us, both as individuals and a community in the years to come, that this wouldn't just be a blip on the radar and everything gets back to perfect, blissful perfection afterwards, but we actually find out just with eyes of faith what he's doing, that inspires our minds and our imaginations to start seeing things from his perspective more and more. I think that's what it would be, that kind of like invigorating of my mind with God again, and not to look upon things as statistics and this is bad and doom and gloom, but actually God's at work and God's faithful and kind and good still. That's what I'd probably say.
And I think thinking about the question corporately in terms of us, God do for us as City Church, and thinking about this last year that we've had, the sense of being apart from one another, I guess asking God to bring that to an end as soon as possible, asking God not only that we would return, but we wouldn't bounce back to where we were, but we would bounce forward, we would move forward, we actually have a sense of faith of what God is doing, not just in restoring us to March the 1st, 2020, but actually what new things is God doing. And there is something for me about, it's not about chasing numbers, and it never has been for us as City Church, but actually seeing new people come to know Jesus, with all the liberation and freedom that he brings, seeing a diverse set of people come to know Jesus that don't necessarily look like me, they don't have the same colour skin as me, or don't come from the same background as me. Like, that would be a wonderful thing to see our church grow in that way, to start growing in love for one another more, to serve each other more, serve the city more. I think that's still throbbing heartbeat of what is it actually we are still here for as a church. Like, I would like God to reinvigorate us for that, and to create some of the conditions by which we could do that in a more effective way.
It's, believe it or not, it's very nearly time up.
Oh man.
You getting into it now, Mark?
Yeah. Just get started.
Mark's been really quiet all morning until like this last half an hour, strangely. What I suggest we do, I'll just do a few quick fire questions. So I'll pull one out. Just one person per question.
Cool.
All right. I get to choose. Pulling rank. Pepe, what have the lockdowns taught you about yourself?
Wow.
Quick fire, mate.
I asked the wrong person for a quick fire answer.
I like being in control more than I think I did. There's so much outside my control this last year that has left me uneasy. I would say, if that's quick enough.
Yeah, that's pretty quick. It's good. Mark, what was your highlight of 2020?
Lucas being born, and probably corporately all the stories of the kitchen getting funding and people giving and extravagance. It's just been
generosity.
wonderful. That's been really, really
if you're not aware of that, we are now something like £14,000 shy of our target now for the kitchen.
So that must be like 56,000 or something?
It's crazy, yeah, and that is without any... Well, no, it's some outside funding, isn't it? Yeah, that's a lot of that's come through your generosity, City Church. So thank you so much to the incredible anonymous givers. Really, really amazing. Nikki's still doing cartwheels, somersaults now even, I think. Does anyone know a good chiropractor, by the way? Pete Roderick, where have you found God's grace in surprising places in the past 12 months?
Probably in the Psalms. Not that I should have been surprised, because it's Holy Scripture. But the Psalms have continued to surprise me and provided a way to pray in a way that sometimes I thought that maybe they function in a certain way, revealing cast iron truths about who God is, and they do that, but they also give you a language in which to respond to God, and finding that in the Psalms, I've never really used them in that way, and that's been surprising, and it's been good, and it's been God's grace.
Fantastic. Do I get to do one last one?
Yes, you do, definitely.
What would you like to see God do in 2021? That's a good one to end on, isn't it? I mean, I think probably, as has been said by the guys in various ways, that sense of deepening spiritually, in love for God, love for one another would be amazing. I still feel, as a frequent preacher, one of the things that I really want to see God do in 2021 is for the preached word to impact the lives of those who are not yet Christians, and for us to have far more people who wouldn't call themselves Christians among us, in whatever format we're gathering, but responding to God as well. I feel like there's promises God's given me about that over the years that I've not really begun to see the fullness of, and seen bits and pieces of that, but that would be one thing big time, and not just about myself and preaching, but I think for us as a church as a whole, I would like to see us, I'd like to see God adding to us, and for that sense of mission to expand and to grow. I love things like Food Bank and the various other sort of missional things that we do, but I think that cutting edge of the gospel bearing fruit in people's lives through proclamation would be one of the things that I would long for. Yeah.
Good.
Well, there we are. There is the first live stream of 2021. We've come to an end. There's all kinds of things that we wanted to be able to share about, and we will follow up with an email in terms of things that we are planning on, hoping to be able to do in 2021. We're talking about things like season of giving, addressing some specific topics, some things that have happened over the last year that we want to give some proper airtime to, and do in a way that is honouring and is theological, I suppose, rather than just reacting in the moment. So you can look out for things like that coming up, and please do pray for us. Thank you for your support for us, for loving us, for keeping on and praying for us, particularly for Pete and Sarah and the kids. It's been amazing to know that you're praying for and supporting those guys. And of course, we're all praying for you. We look forward to seeing loads of you over the next few weeks. Prayer meetings in person on Sunday evenings, which are still going to happen in a socially distanced manner. And for the minute, at least, we're going to continue on doing live streams Sunday by Sunday as the best way of doing our church community together, with the Zoom thing afterwards. Of course, the minute that we think that that's something that can change, we'll be communicating that so that we all know and have some idea of what's going on. Any final words?
I think so.
No.
Well, in that case, it's good night from me, and it's good night from them.
Good night.